Okay, so I'm doing this video on the Quran and if it's perfectly preserved. Before I start, I want to say that I don't hate Muslims and I don't hate Islam. I think that Islam has some good things, but some bad things, but in the end I think it's not true. I think Christianity is true, and I'm doing this video because and I invite you Muslims, if you're listening to this video, to go through the evidence with me and then in the end make your own honest give your own honest opinion about this topic. And if I'm wrong, just point it out to me. Because in the end, what we want is just to worship God, give Him the glory that He deserves in the right way. So yeah, so let's take a look at the Quran and to see if it's really perfectly preserved. This is an argument used by Muslims, and it can also be an argument used against Islam, because if the Quran is not perfectly preserved, then Islam must be false, because the Quran says that it will be perfectly preserved, and if it's the word of God eternal, then it cannot contain a false claim. Now, and if it's perfectly preserved, then you can use it as an argument for Islam, because it's a corroboration of what the Quran says. And you cannot even argue, well, if it's perfectly preserved, this shows that Islam is true, or gives at least some evidence for it. So now let's look at the claim. So the claim is that the Quran has been handed down to our age in its complete and original form since the time of Muhammad. Now, definition problems. Now, definition problems with this. What does it mean to say that the Quran is perfectly preserved? Does it mean to say that the words are the same, like word by word? If you go to Muhammad's time, you have the exact same words that we have now. But now there is a problem with that, because according to Bukhari, which is like the most trustworthy collection of hadith in Islam, we have the following information. I heard Isham bin Hakim bin Hizam reciting Surah Al-Furqan in a way different to that of mine. Allah's apostle had taught it to me in a different way. So I was about to quarrel with him during the prayer, but I waited till he finished. Then I tied his garment round his neck and seized him by it and brought him to Allah's apostle and said, I have heard him reciting Surah Al-Furqan in a way different to the way you taught it to me. The Prophet ordered me to release him and asked Hisham to recite it. When he recited it, Allah's apostle said, it was revealed in this way. He then asked me to recite it. When I recited it, he said, it was revealed in this way. The Quran has been revealed in 7 different ways, so recite it in the way that is easier for you. Sahih Bukhari, book 41, number 601. Sorry. So we hear that the Quran was recited in 7 different ways, called the haruf. Okay. So now, what are the haruf exactly? Okay, so if it was recited in different ways, what does it even mean to say that it's preserved in like the original was? So you will need to say that at least it is like one of these haruf. But that gives us some problems, because the Quran says in Surah 85 verse 21 to 22, but this is an honored Quran in a preserved slate. So if the Quran is in a preserved slate in heaven, then this verse shows us that the Quran must be preserved word by word, which creates a problem if the haruf involve textual differences. Because think about this, if the Quran is in heaven in a slate, then it's written in a unique way, right? So if it's preserved, and if that way was the way revealed to Muhammad, then how do you have 7 different ways? Now, are these just ways of reciting it, like melody thing, or does it involve textual differences? Even if it doesn't involve meaning differences, if it involves textual differences, you've already got a problem here, because if you got a slate in heaven with the exact words, then how is it that they are revealed in 7 different ways, and we recite them in a way that's better for us? How do we know that we chose the way which is the same way that is in heaven? So that just gives some definition problems. We don't know really what it means to say that the Quran is perfectly preserved, because it was revealed in 7 ways. So maybe you can say, okay, So to say that it's perfectly preserved means that it's still in one of those 7 ways. But even that brings some problems, because so if this argument is used like an argument for Islam, there must be a way for us to check if it holds or not. But how can we test if the argument goes through or not? If this claim is true, how can we test the claim? Because for you to use the claim that the Quran is perfectly preserved as an argument for Islam, we need a way to test the claim, right? Because if the claim is unfalsifiable, then you cannot use it as an argument. Okay, so we should expect that we could compare the text we have now to the original text to see if it's the same. But the problem is that that's impossible. We cannot compare the text we have today to the original manuscripts because they were burned. We can find this information in Bukhari, book 61, number 510. The fact that we can't even compare the Quran we have today to the original makes it very hard to present a positive argument for the preservation. So if you're going to tell me that the Quran is perfectly preserved and therefore I should accept Islam because of that, you need to provide me some argument for the preservation of the Quran. And the problem is that you can't do that because the Qurans were burned. So how do many Qurans were burned? Only one version is left, and how do you know that it's the correct one? Okay. And this information about the burning in the Quran is in Sahih Bukhari, which is again the most trustworthy source of hadith that we have, according to Muslims. So Hudayfa bin Yamam came to Uthman at the time when the people of Sham and the people of Iraq were waging war to conquer Armenia and Azerbaijan. Hudayfa was after the people of Sham and Iraq differences in the recitation of the Quran. Look, differences in the recitation. So he said to Uthman, O chief of the believers, save this nation before they differ about the book, the Quran, as the Jews and the Christians did before. So Uthman sent a message to Hafsa saying, send us the manuscripts of the Quran so that we may compile the Quranic materials in perfect copies and return the manuscripts to you. Hafsa sent it to Uthman. Uthman then ordered Zayd bin Thabit, Abdullah bin Az-Zubair, Said bin Al-Has, and Abdurrahman bin Harith bin Hisham. Sorry, I'm not very good at reading these names. To rewrite the manuscripts in perfect copies. Uthman said to the 3 Qurayshi men, in case you disagree with Zayd bin Thabit on any point in the Quran, then write it in the dialect of Quraysh. The Quran was revealed in their tongue. They did so, and when they had written many copies, Uthman returned the original manuscripts to Hafsa. Uthman sent to every Muslim province 1 copy of what they had copied, and ordered that the other Quranic materials, whether written in fragmentary manuscripts or whole copies, be burned. Said bin Thabit added, a verse from Surah Al-Ahzab was missed by me when we copied the Quran, and I used to hear Allah's apostle reciting it. So we searched for it and found it with Khuzahima bin Thabit al-Ansari. That verse was, among the believers are men who have been true in their covenant with Allah. 33:23. Okay, so we see that Uthman burned the Quranic materials. So how do we know that Uthman chose the right Quran? Now, if you are going to use the preservation of the Quran as an argument, you need to give me some reason why you should believe that Uthman chose the right Quran. And there are not many good reasons, as we will see after this, because there was disagreement. So it's impossible to test if the original Quran is the same Quran that we have now. Now, can we actually have an argument to show that the Quran was not preserved? Maybe we can. Was it lost in battles? This is in Ibn Abi Dawud Kitab al-Masahif, and it says, many of the passages of the Quran that were sent down were known by those who died on the day of Yamama, but they were not known by those who survived them, nor were they written down, nor were they found with even 1 person after them. So they were lost. So you have actually Muslim sources saying us that some of the passages of the Quran were lost. Now think about this. If you know in history, there's something called the criteria of embarrassment. And it's to test if something is accurate or not. So if you have someone stating something that would embarrass them, then probably it's true. Because what would they gain by what would the Muslims gain by inventing this story of non-preservation of the Quran? Certainly they wouldn't gain anything. This gives them this gives them discredibility. So if it gives them discredibility, then why did they invent it? Because probably it was true. But if this is true, then it means that the Quran is not preserved because some things were lost. And now we have another criteria, which is multiple attestation, and we have more sources that say things like this. You want to see one? Those were Muhammad's chosen teachers. So who should we trust the most? Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, the one that the Muslims think that is the best man that ever lived on the face of the earth. He chose 4 teachers to teach the Quran. And this is in Bukhari. So very important Muslim source. Abdullah bin Amr mentioned Abdullah bin Masud and said, I shall ever love that man, for I heard the Prophet Muhammad saying, learn the Quran from 4. Abdullah bin Masud, Salim, Muhad, and Ubay bin Ka'b. Okay, so if you want to learn the Quran, learn from these 4. Now what exactly they said about the Quran? Of course they all agreed, right? Well, wrong. They disagree in the number of chapters in the Quran. Ibn Masud's Quran has 111 chapters. Ubay's Quran has 116 chapters. And Zayd's Quran, which is today's Quran, and notice that he was not even among these 4, has 114 chapters. So how do you know which one of these 3 is the true Quran? You don't. Okay? So, and probably the one that we have now is not the original one, because those 2 guys were chosen by Muhammad, so they probably know more than Zayd. Okay? So maybe the Quran that we have now is not the true Quran. Now you want more evidence of this? Let's see more evidence. Early Muslim testimonies. Now who should you trust more? Today's Muslim apologists that tell you that the Quran is perfectly preserved, or the early Muslim testimonies? Ibn Umar al-Khattab, companion of Muhammad, second Khalifa, declares, let no one of you say that he has acquired the entire Quran, for how does he know that it's all? Much of the Quran has been lost. Thus let him say, I have acquired of it what is available. Okay, so this is the second Khalifa. Okay, so this is Omar, this is the second Khalifa, this is a guy that you should trust. And again, criteria of embarrassment. Why would he make up this? There's no reason. So if this is true, then this means that the Quran is not preserved. So so that means that the Quran has a false claim, which namely that it is that will be preserved. So you should start doubting if Quran is really true, and if it's really from God, and if it's not, then Islam falls apart. Now Aisha, this is Muhammad's wife, right? Aisha states, during the time of the Prophet, the chapter of the parties used to be 200 verses when read. When Uthman edited the copies of the Quran, look, remember Uthman burning the Quran, only the current verses were recorded. So what about the other ones? They disappeared, they were lost, so it's not preserved. Aisha, Muhammad's wife, stating this. Okay? Now, Ibn Masud. Now, the people have been guilty of deceit, and this is in Masud. The people have been guilty of deceit in the reading of the Quran. I like it better to read according to the recitation of him, Muhammad, whom I love more than of Zayd bin Ibn Thabit, which is the one that you have now. This is Zayd's Quran, is the one you have now. By him besides whom there is no God. I learned more than 70 surahs from the lips of Apostle of Allah while Zayd was still a youth, having 2 locks and playing with the youth. Okay, so you have Ibn Masud saying that Zayd's Quran is not trustworthy, and guess who Ibn Masud is? Okay, Ibn Masud is one of Muhammad's chosen teachers. Okay, so should you trust him or not? Okay, so now this gets some problems. So first we see that it's impossible to verify that the Quran is perfectly preserved. So we cannot use that as a positive argument because much of it has been burned. You cannot compare it. Now, is it possible to check if that the Quran is not perfectly preserved? Yes, it is, because you have this teacher, Muhammad's chosen teacher, and it's actually the first one that is named. You see here, the first one named Abdullah bin Masud. So this is the first chosen teacher of the Quran says that the Quran is not perfectly preserved by Zaid. Aisha says that it's not perfectly preserved. Umar says it's not perfectly preserved. So you're going to trust. I advise you to go through this evidence and try to reach the truth. God bless you.